He didn't just deny her boarding. He didn't just insult her. Brett Sterling, a man who thought his little patch of carpet behind the podium made him a god, looked a quiet, hoodie-wearing woman dead in the eye and ripped her passport in half. He thought she was nobody. He thought she was just another passenger he could bully to make himself feel big. But he made a fatal calculation. That woman wasn't just a passenger. She was Dr. Keisha Reynolds, a senior FAA inspector conducting a covert field audit on civil rights violations. And by the time the pieces of that passport hit the floor, Brett's entire life was already over. He just didn't know it yet. This is the story of how one man's prejudice collided with the highest level of federal authority. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal C hummed with that particular frequency that seems to induce migraines. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Thursday, the peak of the evening rush, and the air smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and rising anxiety. Dr. Keisha Reynolds adjusted the strap of her worn-out duffel bag on her shoulder. She looked nothing like the woman who appeared in the official photo on her federal ID card, buried deep within the lining of her bag. In that photo, she was sharp-edged, wearing a navy blazer, hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes radiating the authority of someone who could ground a Boeing 747 with a single signature. Today, however, Keisha was playing the role. She wore a faded grey hoodie, comfortable joggers that had seen better days, and sneakers that were scuffed at the toes. Her hair was loose and natural. She looked like a tired college student, or perhaps a struggling artist heading home. She looked like an easy target. That was the point. For the last 6 months, the Federal Aviation Administration had received a disturbing number of complaints regarding Horizon Air's ground staff at O'Hare. The reports were consistent. Minority passengers were being pulled out of priority lines, forced to gate-check carry-ons that fit the sizes perfectly, and subjected to random additional screening at the gate. The name Brett Sterling appeared in 12 separate complaints in just 8 weeks. Keisha was here to see if Brett lived up to the legend. She stood near a pillar, sipping a bottle of water, watching Gate C-12. The flight to Seattle was boarding in 10 minutes. Behind the podium stood a man who fit the description perfectly. Brett Sterling was in his mid-40s, with a haircut that was too young for him, and a uniform that was just a little too tight across the chest, as if he were trying to emphasize muscles that weren't really there. He didn't smile. He scanned the waiting area like a prison warden looking for contraband. "Please, sir, the bag fits." "I measured it," a soft voice pleaded. Keisha's eyes narrowed. Brett was currently dealing with a young Hispanic mother, struggling with a stroller and a diaper bag. "It doesn't matter if you measured it, Mom," Brett said, his voice loud enough to carry. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking over her head, performing for the crowd. "The wheels stick out. It's a gate check. $50. "But I need the diaper bag for the baby." "Pay the fee or you don't fly. Step aside," Brett snapped, waving a hand dismissively. "Next!" The young mother looked close to tears, fumbling for her credit card, moving out of the line. Keisha made a mental note. Strike 1. Lack of empathy. Potential policy violation regarding medical, childcare bags. Keisha waited until the boarding announcement for Group 1 and First Class began. She pulled out her phone, checking her digital boarding pass. She had purchased a full-fare first-class ticket on a government credit card, specifically to test the priority interaction. She joined the queue. Ahead of her, a tall man in a bespoke suit walked up. Brett flashed a winning, sycophantic smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Lovely weather in Seattle today. Enjoy your flight." "Thanks, Brett," the man said, breezing through. Keisha stepped up next. The smile vanished from Brett's face so quickly it was almost comical. It was replaced by a look of sneering confusion, his eyes darting from her scuffed sneakers to her hoodie. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her clothes. "Zone 5 is boarding later, miss," Brett said, his tone bored. "Step aside and wait for your group." Keisha didn't move. She held out her phone. "I'm in Group 1. Seat 2A. Brett let out a short, derisive huff. He didn't even look at the screen she was presenting. "Look, I don't have time for games. The economy line starts back there near the restroom. Don't try to sneak into priority just because the line is moving." "I'm not sneaking," Keisha said, keeping her voice calm. The perfect picture of a weary traveler. "I paid for a first-class ticket. Scan the code." Brett leaned over the podium, invading her personal space. The smell of peppermint gum and stale cigarette smoke wafted off him. "Let me see that." He snatched the phone from her hand, a violation of protocol right there. He squinted at the screen. It clearly showed Reynolds, K First Class. Group 1. Most agents would have apologized and scanned it. Brett Sterling was not most agents. He saw the ticket, and his ego saw a challenge. He couldn't reconcile the woman in the hoodie with the ticket in his hand. Therefore, in his mind, something was wrong with the woman, not his assumption. "This looks like a screenshot," Brett said, handing the phone back with a scoff. "People edit these all the time. I need to see ID." "You checked my ID at the check-in counter," Keisha lied smoothly, testing him. "And TSA checked it." "I didn't check you," Brett retorted. "And I have the authority to verify the identity of any passenger who presents suspicious documentation. ID. Now." The line behind them was growing. A few people were shifting uncomfortably. A man in a polo shirt behind Keisha sighed loud enough to be heard. "Come on, let's go." Keisha reached into her pocket and pulled out her passport. It was her personal one, not her diplomatic one. She was saving that for the nuclear option. She handed it to him. Brett flipped it open. He looked at the photo. He looked at her. He looked back at the photo. "Keisha." He read the name out loud, dragging out the syllables mockingly. "Says here you're an analyst. You afford a $2,000 ticket on an analyst's salary?" "My finances aren't really part of the boarding process, are they?" Keisha asked, her voice hardening just a fraction. "Is the name on the passport the same as the ticket?" Brett's face turned a shade of red. He didn't like being talked back to. He felt his control slipping, and for a man like Brett, control was the only currency that mattered. He looked at the long line of people watching him. He needed to assert dominance. "You know what I think?" Brett said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, nasty whisper. "I think you stole this credit card. Or maybe you're a mule. This passport. The lamination looks loose." "The passport is valid. It was issued by the U.S. State Department 3 months ago," Keisha stated. "Scan the boarding pass, Brett." Using his first name was the trigger. Brett's eyes bulged. "That is Mr. Sterling to you. And you know what? I think this document is fraudulent." He held the passport up with both hands. "Don't," Keisha warned, her civilian mask slipping just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "That is federal property." "It's fake property," Brett sneered. With a violent, jerky motion, Brett Sterling twisted his wrists. The sound was sickeningly loud in the sudden silence of the gate area. The stiff cardstock of the data page crunched, and the binding thread snapped. He ripped the passport clean in half, separating the photo page from the booklet. He dropped the pieces onto the counter with a look of triumph. "There," he announced, his voice booming. "Now nobody is flying anywhere with that. Security," he yelled into his radio. "I have a disruptive passenger at gate C12 with fraudulent documents." The silence that followed was absolute. 50 people stared in shock. Keisha looked at the torn booklet on the counter. A cold, dangerous calm washed over her. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She slowly reached into her hoodie pocket and tapped the record button on the digital dictaphone she had running since she walked up. "Strike 3, she whispered. The atmosphere at gate C12 shifted from annoyance to hostility in a split second. The destruction of the passport acted like a flash-bang grenade. For a moment, everyone was stunned, blinking, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Did he just—" someone whispered behind Keisha. Brett stood tall behind his podium, chest puffed out, riding the adrenaline high of what he perceived as a victory. He had stopped a threat. He had protected the flight. In his warped narrative, he was the hero. "Step back!" Brett barked at Keisha, pointing a finger at her face. "Back away from the podium. You are now trespassing in a secure federal zone." Keisha didn't back away. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on his. "You have just committed a federal felony under Title 18, Section 1590 of the United States Code, in addition to destruction of government property. I suggest you call your supervisor immediately." Brett laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, you're a lawyer now. First, you're a rich first-class passenger. Now you're a lawyer. Keep talking, honey. You're just digging the hole deeper." A young man in the line, the one in the polo shirt who had sighed earlier, stepped forward. His name was David Thorne, and he was a junior partner at a tech litigation firm in Austin. He looked at Brett with an expression of utter disbelief. "Hey," David said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I saw that. She didn't do anything. You just tore up her passport." Brett turned his aggression toward David. "Sir, stay out of this unless you want to be denied boarding too. This is a security matter." "It's a criminal matter," David retorted, pulling out his phone. "I'm recording this. You can't just destroy people's ID because you're having a bad day." "Put the phone away," Brett shouted, his voice cracking. "It is illegal to film airline personnel." "Actually, it's not," Keisha said calmly. "Not in a public terminal." "Security!" Brett screamed again into his radio, ignoring the logic. "I need backup at C12. I have multiple hostiles aggressively swarming the desk." Keisha shook her head slightly. Hostiles. Swarming. He was using buzzwords to trigger a heightened police response. He was weaponizing the security apparatus against a woman he simply didn't like. 2 minutes later, the crowd parted as 3 uniformed officers arrived. Leading them was Officer Miller, a burly man with a red face who looked like he and Brett might drink at the same bar. "What's the problem here, Brett?" Miller asked, his hand resting casually near his taser. He didn't look at Keisha. He looked straight at the agent. "She tried to board with a fake boarding pass," Brett lied, the words tumbling out fast. "When I asked for ID, she gave me this obviously fake passport. When I confiscated it, she lunged at me. We had a struggle and it tore. Now she's refusing to leave and inciting the other passengers." "That is a lie," David yelled from the crowd. "He tore it. There was no struggle. Check the cameras." "Back off, sir," Miller shouted at David, pointing a finger. He then turned to Keisha. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." "Officer," Keisha said, her voice steady. "I am asking you to preserve the evidence on that counter and review the CCTV footage before you take action. This agent intentionally destroyed my passport." I said, "Hands behind your back." Miller didn't care about evidence. He cared about clearing the gate. He grabbed Keisha's wrist and spun her around. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was distinct and final. "You are making a mistake," Keisha said. She wasn't resisting, but she wasn't making it easy for them either. She stood tall. "Officer, check my back pocket. My wallet is there. Check my second ID." "We'll check everything in the holding cell," Miller grunted. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct, trespassing, and presenting forged documents." Brett Sterling watched from behind the podium, a smug smirk plastered across his face. He crossed his arms, looking at the line of passengers. "See, folks, we take safety seriously here at Horizon Air. We don't let just anyone on the plane. Boarding will resume in 5 minutes." As Miller marched Keisha away, passing the stunned onlookers, Keisha made eye contact with David, the man recording. "Don't delete that," she said to him. "I won't," David promised, looking furious. "I'm a lawyer. I'll meet you at the station." Keisha was led down the concourse, the walk of shame. People stared. Some filmed. Some shook their heads, assuming she must have done something terrible to be in cuffs. But Keisha's mind was racing, calculating. She had enough. She had the incident. She had the witness. She had the false arrest, but she wanted more. She wanted to see how high the rot went. She wanted to see if the station manager would back Brett up or do the right thing. She decided to wait to play her ace card. She would endure the holding cell. She would let them process her. Because the harder they hit her now, the harder the hammer would drop when she revealed who she really was. They led her through a heavy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The noise of the terminal faded, replaced by the hum of servers and the squeak of rubber boots on linoleum. They brought her to a small, windowless room with a metal table and a single chair. A chain link ring was bolted to the wall. Miller shoved her into the chair. "Sit. Don't move." He left the room, the heavy door slamming shut. Keisha heard the lock click. She was alone. Her wrists were aching, but her resolve was iron. She took a deep breath, counting to 10. Phase 1 complete, she thought. Now comes the interrogation. She visualized Brett Sterling back at the gate, scanning tickets, feeling untouchable. He probably thought this was just another Tuesday. He probably thought she would plea out, pay a fine, and disappear. Keisha smiled, a cold, sharp expression that would have terrified Brett if he could see it. "Enjoy your last hour of employment, Mr. Sterling," she whispered to the empty room. The air in the holding room was stale, recycled too many times, much like the accusations being thrown at Keisha. 20 minutes had passed since the handcuffs had been slapped on her wrists. The heavy metal door creaked open. Officer Miller returned, but he wasn't alone. Following him was a woman who radiated the specific type of exhausted hostility found in middle management. She wore a Horizon Air blazer that was slightly wrinkled and held a clipboard like a weapon. "I'm Linda Gravel," the woman announced, not bothering to sit. She leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "Station manager for Horizon Air at O'Hare. Officer Miller tells me you caused quite a scene at my gate." Keisha shifted in the metal chair. The handcuffs were biting into her skin, but her expression remained impassive. "Your agent ripped up my passport, Miss Gravel. I'd say he caused the scene." Linda rolled her eyes, a gesture practiced 1,000 times on complaining customers. "Brett Sterling has been with us for 10 years. He knows a fake document when he sees one. And frankly, looking at you..." She gestured vaguely at Keisha's hoodie and sneakers. "You don't fit the profile of a first-class passenger. We see it all the time. People buy tickets with stolen miles, print fake passes, try to sneak into the lounges. So, profiling is official Horizon policy?" Keisha asked, her voice dropping an octave. "Pattern recognition is policy," Linda corrected sharply. "Now here is the situation. Officer Miller is ready to book you for trespass and fraud. That's a night in jail, a felony record, and a lot of legal fees." Linda pulled a document off her clipboard and slid it across the metal table. "Or," Linda continued, her voice taking on a sickly sweet tone, "you sign this. It's a voluntary removal and liability release form. It states that you agree you were denied boarding due to non-compliance, you agree not to sue Horizon Air or the Chicago Department of Aviation, and you agree to a lifetime ban from our airline. You signed this, we drop the charges, and you walk out of here. You find another way home." Keisha looked down at the paper. It was a standard coercion tactic. Bully the passenger, threaten them with jail, and get them to sign away their rights to cover the airline's mistake. "And my passport?" Keisha asked. "The one Brett destroyed?" "We will confiscate the fraudulent fragments for our internal investigation," Linda said dismissively. "If it's real, you can apply for a new one." "Not our problem." Keisha looked up at Linda. "You haven't even looked at the passport, have you? You're taking Brett's word without verifying the evidence." "I trust my team," Linda snapped. "Sign the paper or go to jail. I have a flight to close." Keisha leaned back, the metal chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I won't be signing that, and I suggest you don't close that flight, because if that plane takes off without me, and without a proper audit of the gate manifest, you are going to be in violation of FAA Regulation 14, CFR Part 121. Linda laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Listen to you. You memorize a few regulations on Google and think you can scare me. I run this terminal. Officer Miller, process her. She wants to play hardball. Let's see how she likes the county lockup." Miller stepped forward, grinning. "With pleasure. Stand up." He grabbed Keisha by the arm, roughly hauling her to her feet. "Empty your pockets. Everything on the table. We have to inventory your personal effects before transport." Keisha stood up. She knew this was the moment. They were about to cross the Rubicon. "My ID," Keisha said softly, "is in the inner zipper of the duffel bag. You might want to look at that before you put me in a squad car." "We'll look at whatever we want," Miller grunted. He grabbed her worn-out duffel bag and upended it onto the table. Clothes, a toiletry bag, and a paperback book tumbled out. Miller poured through the items with no respect. He grabbed the bag itself, shaking it. He felt the hard rectangle in the hidden lining. "What's this?" Miller muttered. "Contraband." He unzipped the hidden compartment. He reached in and his hand brushed against cold leather. He pulled out a black, bifold wallet. It wasn't a standard civilian wallet. It was sleek, heavy, and had a gold foil stamp on the front. Miller paused. The weight of the object felt different, serious. He flipped it open. The light from the overhead bulb caught the gold shield pinned inside. It was an eagle, wings spread, sitting atop a shield that read, "Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration." Opposite the badge was an ID card. It featured the photo of Keisha, the professional one in the blazer. The text below was bold and red. "Dr. Keisha Reynolds, Senior Special Agent, Safety Inspector, Security Clearance, Top Secret." The room went dead silent. The hum of the ventilation system suddenly seemed deafening. Miller froze. His eyes went wide, staring at the badge, then at Keisha, then back at the badge. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Linda Gravel, noticing Miller's paralysis, stepped closer. "What is it? Did you find drugs?" She looked down at the wallet in Miller's hand. She stopped breathing. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it inverted violently. The predator-prey relationship had been flipped on its head. Keisha stood there, hand still cuffed behind her back, watching the blood drain from Linda Gravel's face. It was a fascinating biological process. Linda went from a flushed red of anger to a sickly, paste-like grey. "Officer Miller," Keisha said. Her voice was no longer the soft, pleading tone of a passenger. It was the command voice of a federal officer. "You are currently holding a federal agent in restraints without cause. I suggest you rectify that immediately." Miller dropped the badge onto the table as if it were burning hot. His hands were shaking. I didn't. Uncuff me, Keisha barked. Now. Miller scrambled behind her. He fumbled with the key, dropping it once before managing to unlock the cuffs. As soon as the metal clicked open, Keisha rubbed her wrists, rotating her shoulders. She didn't thank him. She walked to the table, picked up her badge, and clipped it onto the belt of her joggers. She then picked up her phone. "Miss Gravel?" Keisha said, turning to the station manager. Linda was trembling. "You said you trust your team. You said Brett knows a fake document when he sees one. Do you still stand by that assessment?" I didn't know," Linda stammered, backing up toward the door. You were undercover. That's entrapment." "It is an audit," Keisha corrected coldly. "And you failed. Catastrophically. You just attempted to coerce a federal inspector into signing a false liability release under threat of imprisonment." Keisha unlocked her phone. "I am declaring a code-red security breach at Gate C-12. As of this moment, Horizon Air Flight 492 to Seattle is grounded. No one boards. No one leaves." "You can't ground the plane," Linda whispered, horrified. "The costs. The delays. Watch me." Keisha dialed a number. She put it on speaker. "Director Vance," a deep voice answered on the second ring. "Status? Director, this is Inspector Reynolds. I am at O'Hare. I have been physically assaulted, falsely imprisoned, and my federal passport was destroyed by a Horizon Airgate agent named Brett Sterling. Local law enforcement," she glanced at Miller, who looked like he wanted to vomit, "was used as a weapon to facilitate this civil rights violation. I am initiating a full station shutdown." There was a pause on the line. Then, the director's voice came through, cold as ice. "Are you injured, Agent Reynolds?" "Superficial bruising from the handcuffs, but the passport is destroyed." "Understood," Vance said. "I'm contacting the Chicago PD chief and the TSA Federal Security Director now. Lock it down, Keisha. Burn them." The line went dead. Keisha looked at Miller. "Officer, you have two choices. You can continue to be an accessory to a federal crime, or you can do your job. I want Brett Sterling brought here, in handcuffs, for destruction of government property and interference with a federal officer." Miller swallowed hard. He looked at Linda, then at Keisha. He realized his pension was dangling by a thread. I'll go get him," Miller said, his voice weak. "No," Keisha said. "I'm coming with you. And bring your body cam. I want his reaction recorded when he realizes who I am." They marched out of the holding room. The walk back to Gate C-12 was very different from the walk there. This time, Keisha walked in front, the badge clearly visible on her hip, her stride purposeful. Linda Gravel trailed behind her, frantically typing on her phone, trying to call corporate legal, tears streaming down her face. When they reached Gate C-12, the scene was chaotic. The flight was delayed because the gate computer had been mysteriously locked out. Keisha had done that remotely via her phone the moment she was uncuffed. Brett Sterling was standing there, shouting at a group of confused passengers. "I told you, it's a technical glitch! Back up!" Brett yelled. He looked sweaty and stressed. He turned and saw Miller approaching. A smile broke out on his face. "Hey, Miller, did you book her? Did she cry?" Then he saw Keisha. He saw that she wasn't in cuffs. He saw the way Miller was walking, a step behind her, head down, looking defeated. And then his eyes traveled to her waist. He saw the gold shield. Keisha walked right up to the podium. She didn't shout. She stepped into his personal space, just as he had done to her. She picked up the two halves of her torn passport, which were still sitting on the counter where he had left them like a trophy. She held them up. "You said this was fake property, Mr. Sterling," Keisha said, her voice carrying over the silent gate area. You said I was a nobody. Brett's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Who? I am the United States government, Keisha whispered, leaning in. And you just tore up my authority. She turned to Miller. Arrest him. Brett tried to back away, bumping into the wall. Wait, no! It was a mistake! Linda! Tell them! Linda Gravel turned her back on him, pretending to be on a call. She wasn't going down for him. Miller stepped forward, pulling out his handcuffs again. Brett Sterling, turn around. You have the right to remain silent. The sound of the cuffs clicking onto Brett's wrists was the sweetest sound the waiting passengers had ever heard. David Thorne, the lawyer who had filmed the whole thing, stood in the front row. He was still recording. He gave Keisha a nod. She nodded back. Ladies and gentlemen, Keisha announced to the crowd, raising her voice. My name is Inspector Reynolds from the FAA. This flight is temporarily grounded while we secure a new flight crew and gate staff. Horizon Air will be issuing significant compensation to all of you for this ordeal. She looked down at Brett, who was being led away, weeping, begging for his job. But don't worry, she added. The trash has been taken out. The airport police precinct was usually a place of boredom, filled with pickpockets, drunk passengers, or people who tried to bring brass knuckles through TSA. But tonight, the atmosphere was electric with dread. Captain Miller sat at his desk, head in his hands. He had just finished a 20-minute phone call with the chief of police, who had screamed at him so loudly that Miller had to hold the receiver away from his ear. In interrogation room B, Brett Sterling sat handcuffed to a table. The bravado was gone. The arrogance that had allowed him to rip a passport in half had evaporated, leaving behind a shivering, terrified man who looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. The door opened. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't his union rep. It was Dr. Keisha Reynolds. She walked in, holding a tablet and a fresh bottle of water. She didn't offer him one. She sat across from him, placing the tablet on the table. On the screen was a paused video frame. Brett's face, twisted in a sneer, hands tearing the blue booklet. I want a lawyer, Brett croaked, his voice dry. You'll get one when the federal marshals arrive to transport you, Keisha said calmly. Right now, this is an administrative interview regarding the security breach you caused. You can remain silent. But I should warn you, Horizon Air has already suspended you without pay. The union representative took one look at the video and said they don't defend felonies. You are entirely alone, Brett. Brett flinched. It was an accident. I didn't mean to rip it. It was old. The lamination was peeling. The passport was 3 months old, Keisha corrected, tapping the screen. We have the issuance records, and we have the audio. I recorded you, Brett. I have you on tape saying, it's fake property. That proves intent. She leaned forward. But I'm not here to talk about the passport. I know you're guilty of that. I'm here to talk about the pattern. Keisha swiped on the tablet. A list of names appeared. Maria Gonzalez, July 14th. You made her check a violin that was FAA approved for carry-on. She missed her concert. James Okafor, August 2nd. You called security because he looked at you wrong while boarding first class. Sarah Chen, August 19th. You claimed her visa was invalid. It wasn't. She missed her father's funeral. Keisha looked up, her eyes piercing. Do you see the pattern, Brett? Or do I need to spell it out for you? I was just doing my job, Brett stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. We have strict quotas. Management rides us to collect baggage fees. If we don't hit numbers, we get written up. I check people who look like they might not know the rules. People who you think won't fight back, Keisha finished for him. People who don't look like they have lawyers. People who don't look like you. The door opened again. A man in a sharp suit entered. It was Mr. Sterling's boss's boss, Richard Halloway, the Vice President of Operations for Horizon Air. He had flown in by helicopter from the corporate HQ downtown. He looked furious. "Inspector Reynolds," Halloway said, ignoring Brett completely. "I am Richard Halloway. On behalf of Horizon Air, I want to offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. This employee's actions were rogue and do not reflect our values." "Save the press release, Richard," Keisha said without turning around. "Your station manager, Linda Gravel, stood right there and backed him up. She tried to coerce me into signing a waiver. This isn't a rogue employee. It's a rogue culture." Brett looked at Halloway with hope. "Mr. Halloway, tell her about the pressure you put on us for gate check fees. I was just trying to get the revenue up." Halloway turned on Brett with a look of pure disgust. "You shut your mouth. You are fired, effective immediately. We are pressing charges against you for damaging the company's reputation and inciting a security incident. You are on your own." Brett gasped, slumped back in his chair. The corporate shield he thought would protect him had just turned into a spear. "Actually," Keisha interrupted, standing up, "Horizon Air is going to have bigger problems than just one lawsuit. I've already sent my preliminary report to the Department of Transportation. I'm recommending a Level 4 civil rights audit of your entire Chicago hub. That means we freeze your federal grant money. We review every hiring and firing decision for the last 5 years, and we interview every passenger who filed a complaint that you ignored." Halloway paled. "Inspector, that would cripple us. The Thanksgiving rush is coming. A Level 4 audit would cost us millions." "Then maybe you should have hired better staff," Keisha said coldly. She turned back to Brett. "The marshals are here. You're going to federal lockup tonight. Bond hearing is Monday. I suggest you call your wife, Brett. Tell her why you won't be home for dinner. Tell her you ripped up the wrong woman's life." 2 U.S. Marshals, dressed in tactical gear, entered the room. They hauled Brett up. He was crying openly now, sobbing like a child. "Please, I'm sorry," he wailed as they dragged him out the door. Keisha watched him go, feeling no pity. He hadn't shown pity to the mother with the diaper bag. He hadn't shown pity to her. He was only sorry because he got caught. While Brett was being processed into the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the world outside was catching fire. David Thorne, the lawyer who had filmed the incident, hadn't wasted a second. He had uploaded the video to X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube before the police had even taken Keisha's statement. He titled it, "Power-Tripping Gate Agent Destroys Passenger's Passport. Did not know she was a federal inspector." The algorithm loved it. Within 2 hours, the video had 4 million views. By the next morning, it had 25 million. The visuals were undeniable. The sneer on Brett's face, the loud rip sound, the way Keisha stood calm and dignified while he berated her. And then, the climax, the photo of Keisha walking back to the podium, badge on her hip, while Brett cowered. The internet did what the internet does best. It went to war. Elisot Traveler Justice. I know that guy. He made me throw away my carry-on last year. His name is Brett Sterling. Quos fire Brett. Basta legal. Destruction of a U.S. passport is 18 U.S. Code per abrogative 1590. That's up to 25 years in prison if they tack on the civil rights violations. This guy is cooked. Karma lover. The way the color drained from his face when he saw the badge, inject that into my veins. Horizon Air's social media team tried to contain it. They posted a generic statement. We are aware of an incident at O'Hare and are investigating. Diversity and inclusion are our top priorities. The ratio was brutal. 50,000 comments, all negative. People were posting screenshots of their own denied boarding passes. The stock price of Horizon Air Group opened on Friday morning down 12%. That was a loss of $400 million in market cap, all because Brett Sterling wanted to feel powerful for 5 minutes. But the real twist of the knife came for Brett personally. Brett's wife, Sarah, was a receptionist at a dental clinic. She didn't use social media much. She was at work when her phone started blowing up. Texts from friends, neighbors, even her mother-in-law. "Is that Brett? Oh my God, Sarah, look at the news. Why is your husband in handcuffs?" She clicked the link. She watched the video. She watched her husband, the man who complained every night about disrespectful passengers, treating a black woman like garbage. She saw the cruelty in his eyes. It was a side of him she knew existed, but tried to ignore. Then came the phone call from the lawyer. "Mrs. Sterling, this is a public defender. Your husband has been arraigned on federal charges. Bail is set at $50,000. We need to discuss the fact that he has lost his job and his pension." Sarah sat in the break room, the phone trembling in her hand. They had a mortgage. They had car payments. Brett was the primary earner, and he had just thrown it all away because of his ego. Back at the airport, the cleanup was brutal. Keisha Reynolds was sitting in the VIP lounge, invited personally by the airport CEO this time. She was watching the news on a large, flat-screen TV. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. "The Department of Transportation has announced a historic fine against Horizon Air. Following the viral video of an agent destroying a federal inspector's passport, the airline will be fined $14 million for repeated civil rights violations. Additionally, the agent involved, Brett Sterling, has been indicted by a grand jury." Keisha took a sip of her tea. Her phone buzzed. It was Director Vance. "You're a celebrity, Keisha," Vance said. "The White House just called. They want to use this case as the spearhead for the new Passenger Bill of Rights legislation. You just changed the industry." "I didn't do it for the legislation, sir," Keisha replied quietly. "I did it because he looked at me and saw a victim. I needed him to see a judge." "Well, he's seeing one," Vance laughed. "But listen, there's one more loose end. The lawyer, David Thorne. He wants to sue Horizon Air on behalf of the other passengers in that line who were delayed. He wants you as the star witness." Keisha smiled. "Tell him I'm available, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "I want the settlement money to go to a fund, a legal defense fund for passengers who get bullied by gate agents. Call it the Reynolds Sterling Fund. Let his name be attached to the protection of the very people he hated." Vance chuckled. "That is cold, Keisha. I love it." But the story wasn't quite over. Karma had hit Brett, and it had hit the airline. But real life isn't just about punishment. It's about the permanent scar left behind. 3 days later, Brett made bail. His parents put up their house to get him out. He walked out of the detention center, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he was arrested in. He expected Sarah to be there with the car. The parking lot was empty. He checked his phone. It had been returned to him by the property clerk. He had one text message from Sarah. "The locks are changed. My sister is staying with me. Do not come to the house. The lawyer will send the divorce papers to your parents' address. You embarrassed us. You ruined us. I can't look at you." Brett stood on the sidewalk, the wind whipping his thin shirt. A news van slowed down, a cameraman leaning out to get a shot of the passport ripper. Brett covered his face and turned away. But there was nowhere to hide. He was the most hated man in America. He was unemployed. He was facing prison. And now he was homeless. He reached into his pocket and found a crumpled piece of paper, his receipt from the bail bondsman. He stared at it, remembering the sound of the passport tearing. Rip! It was the sound of his own life tearing apart. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was a fortress of gray stone and grim faces, but on the morning of United States vs. Brett Sterling, it looked more like a movie premiere gone wrong. News vans lined the streets 3 deep. A crowd of over 500 people had gathered on the steps, holding signs that read, "Respect is mandatory," and "Ground the bullies." Inside, the air in courtroom 4B was so thick with tension it felt difficult to breathe. Brett Sterling sat at the defense table. To say he looked defeated would be an understatement. He looked eroded. The man who had once stood behind the Horizon Air podium like a king in his castle was now a trembling, hollow shell. His cheap suit hung loosely on his frame. He had lost nearly 30 pounds in the 6 months since the arrest. His skin was pasty from house arrest, and his eyes darted around the room, terrified of making contact with anyone. His parents sat in the back row behind him. They looked just as broken. They had put their retirement home up for his bail, and the legal fees for his defense had already drained their savings. They sat with their heads bowed, ashamed of the son they had raised. Across the aisle, the atmosphere was different. It was calm, precise, deadly. Dr. Keisha Reynolds sat in the front row. She wasn't wearing the hoodie today. She was in full uniform, her navy FAA blazer, the gold pin on her lapel catching the courtroom lights, her hair pulled back in a sharp, professional bun. She didn't look at Brett. She looked at the empty judge's bench, waiting for the final act of this tragedy to begin. "All rise," the bailiff boomed. The Honorable Judge Martha Harrison swept into the room. She was a legend in the Chicago circuit, a woman known for her intellect and her absolute refusal to tolerate fools. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at the defendant. "Be seated," she commanded. The trial had been swift. The video evidence David Thorne had captured was damning. There was no way to argue around the clear audio of Brett sneering, "It's fake property," followed by the sickening sound of the passport ripping. The defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer named Mr. Garris, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, had tried to argue that Brett was under extreme occupational stress. It was time for the victim impact statement. "The prosecution calls Dr. Keisha Reynolds," the assistant U.S. attorney announced. Keisha stood up. The room went silent. The rustling of papers stopped. Even the court sketch artist paused. She walked to the stand, swore the oath, and sat down. "Dr. Reynolds," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court how this incident has affected you?" Keisha leaned into the microphone. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor of controlled anger beneath it. "Physically, I am fine," Keisha said, "but professionally and personally, the act committed by Mr. Sterling was an assault on my identity. When he tore that passport, he wasn't just tearing paper. He was telling me that no matter who I am, no matter how hard I have worked, no matter that I hold a doctorate and a federal badge, to him, I was just a liar. I was someone who needed to be put in her place." She turned her head, locking eyes with Brett for the first time. Brett flinched physically, shrinking back into his chair. "He didn't check my credentials because he wanted to secure the flight," Keisha continued, her voice rising slightly. "He destroyed my property because he enjoyed the power trip. He wanted to humiliate me. And if I hadn't been a federal agent, if I had been a student, or a grandmother, or a tourist, he would have succeeded. He would have ruined their trip, cost them thousands of dollars, and gone home to sleep soundly. He is a predator who used a podium as a weapon." The jury, 12 men and women from diverse backgrounds, looked at Brett with undisguised disgust. Mr. Garris, Brett's lawyer, stood up shakily. Your Honor, we would like to forego cross-examination. My client would like to make a statement of remorse. Judge Harrison nodded. Proceed. Brett stood up. His hands were shaking so hard, the paper he was holding rattled audibly. I just want to say I'm sorry, Brett stammered. He tried to cry, but he was too dehydrated from fear. I lost my job. My wife left me. My friends won't talk to me. I've been punished enough. I just want to go home to my parents and start over. I didn't know she was an inspector. If I had known— Stop, Judge Harrison interrupted. Her voice cracked through the room like a whip. Brett froze. That is exactly the problem, Mr. Sterling, the judge said, leaning over the bench. You said, if I had known. You are sorry because you picked the wrong victim. You aren't sorry for the act. You are sorry for the consequence. You are telling this court that if Dr. Reynolds had been a civilian, you would feel justified in what you did. No, Silence, the judge ordered. She shuffled her papers. I have heard enough. I am ready to pass sentence. Brett collapsed back into his chair. His mother let out a sob in the back of the room. Brett Thomas Sterling, Judge Harrison read from the verdict sheet, on the count of destruction of government property, a federal felony, and on the count of deprivation of rights under color of law, the jury has found you guilty. But this court also recognizes the malice involved. She took off her glasses. You treated the terminal like your personal fiefdom. You broke the public trust. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 48 months in a federal correctional institution. 4 years. Brett gasped. It was a death sentence for his life as he knew it. But the judge wasn't finished. Following your incarceration, you will serve 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $15,000 to cover the administrative costs of the audit you triggered. And finally, the judge looked down at him with eyes cold as steel. The Department of Homeland Security has petitioned this court regarding your future status. Given that you have proven yourself a threat to the security and order of the aviation system, I am upholding their request. You are hereby placed on the federal no-fly list, permanently. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Permanently? Brett shrieked, forgetting protocol. Your Honor, my sister lives in London. My grandparents are in Florida. You're telling me I can never get on a plane again? You can take the bus, Mr. Sterling, Judge Harrison said, banging the gavel. Or you can walk. But you will never set foot in a secure area of an airport again. Court is adjourned. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in immediately. They didn't use the polite, gentle grip they might use for white-collar criminals. They grabbed Brett by the arms, spun him around, and clicked the heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. Mom! Dad! Brett screamed as they hauled him toward the side door. His father stood up, tears streaming down his face, and turned his back on his son. He couldn't bear to watch. 6 months into his sentence at the FCI Terre Haute, the reality of Brett's new life had settled in. He wasn't a tough guy in prison. He was the passport guy. The other inmates had seen the news. They knew he was a bully who picked on women. In the prison hierarchy, he was at the absolute bottom. He spent his days scrubbing the cafeteria floors, keeping his head down, praying for the days to pass. But the karma outside the prison walls was even more brutal. Because Brett couldn't pay the $15,000 restitution or the legal fees, the creditors came for the co-signers of his bond, his parents. They were forced to sell their home of 30 years, a nice 2-story house in the suburbs, to cover his debts. They moved into a small, rented 1-bedroom apartment across town. Brett's arrogance hadn't just destroyed his life, it had dismantled his family's legacy. Every time they looked at their small, cramped living room, they thought of their son's ego. Meanwhile, Dr. Keisha Reynolds was ascending. The Sterling incident had triggered a massive overhaul of the FAA's oversight program. Keisha was promoted to Regional Director of Civil Rights Compliance. She was now in charge of the entire Midwest Division. On a crisp autumn afternoon, 1 year after the incident, Keisha was walking through Terminal C at O'Hare. She wasn't undercover this time. She was leading a delegation of new inspectors. She stopped at Gate C12. The podium was the same, but the person behind it was different. A young man named Marcus was checking passports. He was smiling. He was helping an elderly woman with her bag, not charging her, just helping her. Keisha watched him for a moment. "Director Reynolds?" Marcus asked, recognizing her. He stood up straighter. "It's an honor to have you here." "At ease, Marcus," Keisha smiled. "How are operations today?" "Smooth, Mum. We're treating everyone like a guest." Keisha nodded, looking at the spot where her passport had been torn. The ghost of Brett Sterling was gone, exorcised by justice. She walked over to the large window, looking out at the tarmac. A massive Boeing 737 was pushing back, engines roaring to life, ready to climb into the clouds. Somewhere, in a small cell in Indiana, Brett Sterling was probably looking out a barred window at a patch of grey sky. If a plane flew over, he would look up with a pang of jealousy so sharp it felt like a knife. He had spent his career grounding people. Now, he was the one who was grounded. Forever. Keisha checked her watch. She had a meeting in D.C. to discuss the new Passenger Protection Act. She turned to her team. "Let's go. We have work to do." As she walked away, the sound of her heels clicking on the concourse floor sounded like victory. And that is the story of how Brett Sterling ripped up his own life the moment he decided to tear up Dr. Reynolds's passport. It's a terrifying reminder that arrogance is a blindfold. Brett was so focused on feeling powerful in his little square of carpet that he didn't see the steamroller coming his way. He lost his freedom, he bankrupted his parents, and he received the ultimate poetic justice, a lifetime ban from the very sky he used to control. It begs the question, in a world where everyone has a camera and cancel culture is terrifying, was the permanent destruction of his life and his parents' home fair? Or was it the only way to truly balance the scales for all the people he bullied before? I want to hear your take. Drop a comment below. Do you think the no-fly list for life was too much, or was it the perfect punishment? If this story satisfied your craving for justice, please hit that like button. It helps get these stories out to more people. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week, we have a story about a billionaire who tries to buy a restaurant just to fire a waiter, only to find out the waiter is the son of his biggest investor. You don't want to miss that. Thanks for watching.